Hello, welcome to London's Call-in 2021. I'm happy to have you here in my session. Today, we'll be guiding you to get started with the external services. But before we start, I would like to introduce myself. So my name is Abdelhakim Mouttaqui. I'm coming from a developer background with 15 years experience. I started my Salesforce journey 7 years ago. Today, I'm working at Van Eygens as a Salesforce technical architect. So Van Eygens is a consultant and the ISV partner. So we help customers to implement Salesforce in using best practices and using as much a standard component and functionality as possible. We also do have some products in App Exchange like Ask Amy and Video to Video. So Ask Amy is a messaging platform where you can have your WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger messages in one platform. Video to Video, it's an app that helps you to schedule video sessions and everything, of course, is recorded and saved inside Salesforce. We also do have other products, but unfortunately they are not yet in the App Exchange, but we are going there. Agenda today, so we will discuss a business scenario and then check the challenges that's coming with this business scenario, discuss the solution, and see how we can solve this challenges using external services. We will follow up with the demo, conclusion, and of course, we'll discuss later on the limitation. The business scenario. So I'm using here a universal container. So I know that everybody is doing certification, knows this company. It's a fake company, but I will also do it for my business scenario. So universal containers use Service Cloud in order to serve their customers and help them with the cases and if there's any problem. So they decided to only get customer data inside Salesforce, but not the transactional data. So which means that no orders, no shipment or data, no appointment, no other extra information rather than the customer data inside Salesforce. We do have a challenge here. So the challenge is that when there is like a case, a customer is contacting the support in order to check, for example, for orders. So the agent doesn't have the order inside Salesforce, so they need to go and switch to another screen in order to find those orders. So basically, the agent has two screens, one for Salesforce and other one for the external app in order to search for the order. This can work if, for example, the case is coming from a phone call and the agent is serving only one customers. And of course, that will be easy. They can search for orders and serve the customers. That will not be a problem. However, the customers are also served via WhatsApp or Messenger. And we ask the agent to handle more than one case. So it's not only one case per customer, so they are not handling one issue. So they have to handle multiple issues, which means that they need to answer the customer and look at the second case, answer the customer and go back to the first customer. So the first customer and second customer. So imagine using the old solution. So the agent will have to search for all orders for customer one, answer the question, and then go to the customer two, search for the customer data two, and then answer the question. But in the meantime, the customer one also reply to the agent with other issue. So then the agent needs to search again. So he's moving back and forward in the search between customer one and customer two, which costs a lot of time. So how we do that? So we can, of course, use external data in order to get data inside Salesforce, external data source in order to get Salesforce data inside Salesforce. However, the company, Universal Containers, doesn't have the possibility to do it now, and it's gonna cost them time, which they don't have. So because they need to solve the problem as soon as possible and make sure that the agent can do their work fast. The backend team, so they propose, of course, to provide us with the API. And then looking at that, it seems that it's a good option. So everybody knows, so we all knows that in order to use external API, we need to use Apex and make a call out to the endpoint. Can be get, post, and stuff, and they'll handle the response and display the response using Lightning Web Component or a Visual Force page or any other solution we may have. But this required to have a developer. So Universal Containers, they don't have developers, and they are not willing to hire a developer only to solve this problem. And of course, time to market is slow because developers need to use Apex, create test class for that, test it in the sandbox, and then test it in other sandbox, of course, before they deploy it to production, review the code and do all of these things, which Universal Containers doesn't have time for that. So basically, that's a no-go for them. Hopefully, Salesforce come up with a solution, which is using external services. It's a configurable way to use and call APIs in a declarative way. So what are external services? So it's a low code way to access external business process. So you don't need any code. So you just need the open API documentation for your API. And it should solve the problem because then Salesforce will generate invocable actions. With that, they will also generate all the Apex class dynamically that we need in order to make an API call to the external system. So adding the new external service, it's quite easy. So knowing Salesforce, they give us a nice UI for that. So we just need to add the name of the external service, add or define the name credential. And of course, copy paste the open API documentation JSON format inside the service schema, so we can then get so then Salesforce can generate the function. For in our example, it's get customer orders by ID, and also generate the input parameters and output parameters. So the input parameters in this case is string. But if, for example, we do have like a post call to the API and our input parameter is an object, then Salesforce will generate Apex class for that input. So we can then use it inside the flow. Same thing for the output parameters. They also, in our case, we have type object here, which means that Salesforce will generate Apex class for that. After we create that one in the external services list, so we will find the name of actions, the description. So basically, this description is coming from the description we put in the document when we declare the new external service. And here you can see still, you don't have to access to that external services. You can here see the input parameters and output parameters. In our demo, we only handle the 200 response, but we can of course add more than that, the 500 and so on, so on. We can also see here that the name credential we choose, and of course the type of the documentation, which is an API documentation. So in the flow, we drag and drop the action, invocable action there, and then we have to filter by type. So it's by default filtered by category, but we have to filter by type. and then we can see the external services. We can then search all our functions here. So as we can see here, so Salesforce always add like external service dash behind the external service name, and of course then the functions name. Also, as I told you previously, so Salesforce also generates the objects that you need for your input or output. So in this example, we need to create a variable, and this variable is for the response, and then we can see that's this Apex class, and it's we can see it here as orders underscore order, and for also orders underscore response. So we are gonna switch now to the demo. So before I switch to the demo, so I want to show you the mock API we create for that example. So we do have two different customers. So one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we click in that one and we get the response. It's a mock API that I'm using right now. And same thing for a different customer. And then we have other response. To get started with that one, so all what we need to do first is to go to the named credential part, and then add our new named credential. So in our case, it's this one. So I already created that one to make it easy for the demo. So the URL, of course, and the name and the label. In our case, our API does not need any authentication. But if there is any need of authentication, of course, we can define multiple type of authentication, for example, OAuth 2.0, password authentication, GWT, GWT token exchange, and so on, so on. For now, for our API, it doesn't need any authentication, so we are going to leave it like that. Second step is to go and create external services. So we are going to search for external services here, external services, and here we are. So I already create one, but I'm going to also create one with you now. Oh. Yeah, here we are, and let's create a new external services. So as I described here, so here in my code, I do have the JSON, yeah, Open API documentation. Just copy paste, and here we are. We are gonna name it order data, and here I need to choose the named credential, add a description, get customer orders. Customer ID, and then there's two different ways to get like the schema. So the first way is to define the URL of the schema, and then Salesforce will get the schema and save it. So if you use this method, Salesforce will always get the schema and save it inside Salesforce. It doesn't mean that if you use the URL and you change the schema in the URL, it will get changed here. No. So they use the schema, they get it, and they copy it, so then you cannot use it. Even though if you use the existing one yeah, that's not gonna be there. So then I save that one. As soon as I click next, then Salesforce, as shown, they will generate the class for me, input, string, and so on, so on, so on. So with this one done, I can see here the API and the description as shown in the slides before. And then of course, by clicking on more details, I can see all the extra details. Next step is to use it in the flow. So now we will go to the flow and then create a new flow. So you can use it as with the screen flow or with the break or trigger flow, or with any type of flows. it will work. So I will go with screen for all for this demo. So let's go for the auto layouts, and then I will select action as mentioned. Of course, we need to filter with type. And then as soon as I click here, I can see my external services. No, sorry, I had, oh, I didn't follow my demo. So I need to choose external services and then I will get that one. So I have created 3 different external services. That's why I can see it here, for example, external services dash order data. This one we created together. And this one is the one I created before. And this one is the V2 of the same API. So let's click on that one. So here we define the names of that action, get orders. And then in the customer ID, we define an existing parameter. So we select a variable that we already have. It can be also a record ID variable that we have. Also, we can here manually assign the variables that we get back. So which means that in the response, we will get back the 200 and the default exception. But we can also let Salesforce decide in which, if they want to handle this automatically. But I will recommend to always assign them manually so we can control our variables. So we're going to create a new resource. And then, of course, the resource going to be Apex type, because, as I said, Salesforce generate Apex variables for that one. As we know that we will provide an object. So here you cannot be lost. So you always see external services _ the name of the external services that you gave and the class that they generate. So what that means? So I created the same service 3 times, but each time they create a class for me. Things that you need to know here is that these classes are dynamically generated, which means that they're there. You can see them here, but you cannot find them within the Apex classes that you do have in Salesforce, and you cannot check the code generated. So you only can use them here. So then, as I know, it's going to be order response. Then I give a name on that one, and that should be fine. Afterwards, customer ID, we need the variable for that one. I don't know if I can use a string, and then done. So this is how we make the call. But I'm gonna show you, so just to make it fast, something I already create. So you can see it in more, yeah, so you can see more details. So I already created this flow. So what does this flow does? It's use the record ID of the case, get the case data. So here we are getting the case data just to get extra information, and looking to the account record link to the case. And with that, we will get the information that we need, which is like the external customer ID that we need in order to send the data here. So in our API to make a call, we need external ID. We are not using the Salesforce ID. Again, so, and then we are checking if the customer ID exists. If it exists, it doesn't exist, then we display another screen. So let me just, then we say, sorry, the external ID is empty, and we ask the agent to fill in the external ID. However, if it exists, then we do the same thing we did before. So we add the customer ID as a parameter, which is this one, and then we assign the response to the order response. With that one, we assign the order information, and we loop. So because we do have orders inside our response object, so we need to create another variable for the orders, and then of course assign those orders to this one, so we can loop inside them and create our response and display it for our agent. So let's look at how it is in Salesforce. So here we do have the case, and now we need to display our orders. So the only thing I need to do is to add the flow object to the case layout. Sorry, drag it here, and then select the correct orders. Of course, when we use the record ID parameters in the flow, it gets recognized automatically, and we can pass the record ID inside this variable, which should help us a lot to get our customer data. So I'm gonna save this one and go back to the view. So here you will see that I am getting my customer data. So Salesforce will make the API call and get me back the data, which I do have here in my Mouttaqui API. So if, of course, if we go here and then delete the customer ID and save it and go back to the case, then we will get that there is no data and we need to fill it again. So with that, I think we are done with the demo. And before I would like to explain you, so I know that the most difficult part here is not creating the external services, but the most difficult part is the open API documentation. So most of the admins doesn't know what that means exactly, because they just use the configurable part, and most of them, they are not really developers. However, we can see here that's really easy to translate what we have on the left side to what we can have on the right side. So in the left side, for example, here we can see that we have, it's the API call, which is a GET, and this is the endpoint of that API. We do have a status answer, and we do have the response body, which is based on this curly bracket, which is an object. So you can see the blue part here on the right side. So first thing you have to do to define the Swagger version, which is 2.0 in this file. And then you can have pet. So you can have one or multiple pet as much as you want. And you do have the action, the action that you can do. So you can have get, post, put, delete, patch, and maybe others. But for the same pet, you can have multiple actions, not only one. And they are listed as a sub-object, nested object inside the pet object. Next slide, we can see here the customer ID. Oh, so the customer ID here is a parameter that we need to pass inside this URL in order to get the customer data. So at the right side, we can see that it's embedded in the parameters list. So we have a parameter, which is a list of objects. So basically, we can have one parameters or multiple parameters. Here we can see the name of that parameter, customer ID. We define where it is this parameter. In our case, it's in the pet. We describe the parameters, and we say if this parameters is required or not. Sometimes some parameters are not required, especially when they are at the end of the call. So sometimes they are not required; they're just for extra stuff. And the type is a string. So it can be a number, it can be anything, but here we specify that it's string. So in Salesforce, they know that they need to send a string parameter. Next, we see here that we have responses. So here we have the status 200, okay? So we have responses object inside the get object. And in the response, we have the description of that response, and we define the schema. So the schema is what will we return? So what kind of object, what contains that object, what parameters inside that object, everything is defined on that schema. So here we have only the 200 in our demo, but we can also have the errors with the 201 if it's a post, 500 if it's an error, and if we can define multiple errors, it's up to us to put the parameters there or the responses there. So inside the definitions, we can see here at the left side that we do have, as I mentioned here, an object as a return parameter, as return data. And inside the object, we have only two parameters, which is customer ID and orders. That's what we can see here. So the first one is the customer ID is type of string. So we're returning back what we get for the customer in order to check if they are really getting what they are asking for. And the second parameters or variables, it's the orders, but this time it's type of array. And then all the items should be of type of orders. So as you can see here, it's pretty intuitive. So if you compare the two versions, it's pretty intuitive and it's pretty easy to read and understand. So as a definition here for the order, so no magic here, order ID, type of string, amount, type of string, and so on, so on. We define all the properties. We can even have another nested object here and so on. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is that we can easily read what's in the response and what is requested as input and generate our documentation. Of course, you need a little bit of practice as an admin, but this is not something difficult. And I believe that every admin in the future will need to learn this documentation. With that said, so I just want to mention here that what should took us, for example, one day and ask a developer to start making an API call, create all the Apex challenges, all Apex object that we need for our input output has been done in few clicks, in few seconds. And also, we don't need to create a unit test, or we don't need to create any extra Apex. We can also do it easily in production, so we don't need to follow the whole DTOP. But just for information, I'm always advising to go for the DTOP, just in case or we are in a hurry and we need something straight away and we cannot wait for the deployment and stuff. We can solve those issues quickly only using external services. In our example, it was pretty easy. So we are making an API call and getting data, but we can take think about a lot of other scenarios, like for example, sending or like requesting repayment for our customers. So if our customers complaining about the product, so the agent can send a request via external services to external system, financial system to reimburse the customers. We can send SMS, send emails, do a lot of other stuff, update maybe records based on the actions that we did in the records. So we can see that external services is providing a lot of possibilities. For now, as far as I know, we cannot still use the external services in Apex class, which means that you cannot create external services and use them in Apex class and call them in Apex class. I hope that Salesforce will provide this solution in the future. Things that we need to keep in mind is that Salesforce doesn't provide schema entities, so which means that you can add any keywords, reserved keywords you want, and external services will create a unique name for that one, and this and make it unique, so you don't to be compatible with Apex Identifier. The second thing is inside the flow. So you cannot edit external services already used in the flow, even if the if the flow is not active yet. So the only solution you have is go and delete all the external services that you have in the flow, or the best solution, in my opinion, you can copy or save the external services as a new version, and you can update the schema in that version. And of course, basically, you can update your external services later on in the flow. Another point, important, it's external services call out aren't allowed where they are pending and committed transactions. This is a known issue, and we have encountered this a lot as an admin or also as a developer. So the recommendation here is to close your transaction and resume flow using the flow element pause. So you need to pause your flow, and then as soon as you pause your flow, all the transaction will be closed, and then you can resume it after 30 seconds, it depends. And then afterwards, the call out will be made. So with that, I think my presentation it's done. Still some resources here to check. So I advise always to look at the Salesforce official documentation, even though there is a lot of blogs, a lot of YouTube's demos and stuff. But in order to master something, it's always recommended to look at the source of the documentation. In this case, the official. It can be a bit complicated to read, but there is a lot of information, a lot of stuff that is not covered by all the blogs, not covered by all the demos, but there you can master, you can even find solution to your problems. And we also have our friend Trailhead, so we can always go there to get started and get used to external services. Unfortunately, there is no way for us to have a QA session. It's as it is a pre-recorded session. I would like to thank you for attending our session. And if you do have any other questions, so feel free to contact me in my Trailblazer or in my Twitter. So, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you and goodbye.